if you can endure the first 2 books where I'm like getting my footing again, but by the time I reach the top 6, you're gonna have to drag me away from this camera because I will not stop talking about them. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to 2025 and welcome to this famously late favorite book wrap up for 2024. I could possibly be the last person to be doing this right now. Better late than never, because this is one of my favorite ways to wrap up the previous reading year, and one of the only steadfast ways I give y'all book reviews for some of my favorite reads. So yes, I am bringing you my top 10 favorite books of 2024 today, and I'm really, really excited to share them with you. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So every single year, I spend hours trying to figure out what this list is, because for some reason, it is really extremely hard to me, and I always struggle. But without a doubt, every year, once I come up with a list and sit on it, it is proven true every year. Now, books 1 through 3, my top 3 of the year, are kind of interchangeable when I made this list. But now, as I've settled on it, I think I can safely say, reaction-wise, this is my order. But know that 1 through 3 just hold so much love. And I think this was one of my hardest years to make this list, even though not all of these are 5 stars. The impact they left on me, the way I've not stopped thinking about them, truly makes this a really great selection of books, and I hope that you are able to take something away from all of them. So coming in with number 10, and this was honestly a surprise. You know, there's some books where you read them and you know for a fact this is going to be one of your favorite books. Well, this was not it for me, but this book was just so much fun, and I have still not stopped thinking about it, and I desperately need to get to book 2. She says that she doesn't read it for like a year, but I desperately need to get to 2, and that is Bonesmith. Now, this was a book that was never even on my radar until I got this beautiful Fairy Loot edition. So yes, this book was not on my radar, but it came as a surprise. But this was just so much fun, and I say that in the best possible way. So this is a YA book about a necromancer, and she is essentially backstabbed during one of her big final trainings that would land her the job she wants, and instead she is banished to a punishment sentence where she is guarding the outskirts along the wall, and across that wall is a forbidden, deadly place, and as a bonesmith, she is able to deal with the dead. So any of these dead that are kind of walking around, think of zombies, but more like, I don't even know, I don't want zombies, but think of scary, and she is spunky, she is brash, but she's also really confident in a way because she knows she's good, and she can back it up, which is always nice. Anyway, but this book reminded me that my favorite type of trio, and one of the reasons I really need to get to the next book, my favorite type of trio is a reckless, bold, but confident and able to back up her skills female, the love interest who is stoic and broody but is also capable and shaking his head and holds all the brain cells, and the last one, golden boy, joking personality that ties the trio together. And I don't know if that sold you on the book or what, but if you have an interest in reading this, I highly say go for it, because it's the type of YA quest story that is just a lot of, well, it's just a lot of fun. And there's also were some pretty good plot twists in here. And honestly, I'm just excited to see where it goes next, and maybe this talking about this will make me actually go pick it up. Also, help me debate in the comments. Do I need the Fairy Loot edition to match this? Seriously, let me know. Now, my number 9 favorite book of the year was one I read in, I think, November. And I knew as soon as I started reading it that I was going to be obsessed and love it. And honestly, the ending was completely and utterly satisfying while also kind of breaking my heart. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings, and if you are someone who loves dark academia and dark fantasy, I'm sure you've heard and or I've already read this, but that is Blood Over Brighthaven, and I loved this book. Honestly, there were so many things I could go into about it. The talk about colonization, the class differences, about what it means to be the working class in a system that is out to get you and oppress you, and yet finding good in someone else, even though at every turn they may not be good adherently. I think our main lead, she is truly morally gray, but in the sense where she is there for her reasons. And she is there because she doesn't always make the best decisions. She is very much indebted and entangled into this system that has oppressed her but has oppressed others more. And even though at the end of the day, she may not always do the right thing, she does track before I keep going on. This is a book about first accepted female into a position that has been predominantly male dominated. She has had to work twice as hard. She is fully capable, but of course, she is turns into the first female in an all male workplace, and they are determined to underestimate her by giving her, as a research assistant, a janitor. But little do they or her know that he is part of this group that had once had to run away from this deadly entity on the outside of the city walls, and now he has come in, and he has knowledge from this world. And together, they help each other out, trying to get to a solution that would put her name on the map. But along the way, they start to discover secrets that they never should have been able to. And it really does beg the question, how far will a institution and government go to keep their citizens in the dark, to uphold what they believe is the greater good? And honestly, I feel like it's one of those timeless tales that everyone needs to read, because I feel like it does spark so many questions, especially if you are in a job that is defined by academia or it's defined by higher level government positions. Just, I feel like it sparks a lot of questions and conversation that everyone would take away from. But that is number 9, Blood Over Bright Haven. Now, if you were here a couple of years ago, honestly, if you have been here at all since me starting my channel in 2020, every year that I have read a Jenna Evans Welch book, it has gone into my top 3 or top favorite book. So it does, I'm not gonna lie, it does hurt a little to put it this far down on my list. But at the same time, judging by what its competition was, it is in no way a bad thing. And this book really did emotionally get me in so many ways. But that is Bells for Lost Things by Jenna Evans Welch. This has, again, been a long time coming. I did knock a couple of highly prioritized books last year off my own TBR, and this book really did rip my heart out. It is, all of her books have an underlying really heavy tone, but this one in particular, I think, went even darker with it. And the best way I can think of this book is, honestly, to compare it to a type of media, the conversations about foster care and about kids being abandoned by their parental figures and still fighting to find them again. Honestly, I would compare this to the Shazam and Billy Batson's journey for our male main character Mason. And I feel like it's just a good, I'm trying to pitch this book to you, it really is Shazam on Mason's side of the story. We also have Willow, and she and her mother have not gotten along in a very long time. And even within her own family, her parents have since divorced, and ever since, nothing has felt right for her. She feels like even at home she's a stranger and she's outcasted from her family, like she doesn't fit the footing anymore. And her mom have not truly connected in years. The journey begins for Willow when she discovers that her mother's sister, who she never knew existed, has died. And now her mom and her are having to travel back to Salem, where a lot of her mom's past that she's kept covered up is coming to the light again. And we also have Mason, who has been in foster care the majority of his life because his mother has lost her parental rights to him due to being addicted to drugs and not getting the help that will help her get him back. But he's never given up on their relationship. She is his one thing in the world, that even if she's never been the best at being a mom, it's his mom. He needs to find her again because that is his tether to the world. And both of these kids are struggling in just really big ways. So honestly, it really did break my heart, but it also put it back together again because as they find each other, they see each other, they help each other along these journeys, and they're able to talk to each other about things that they've never been able to say to anyone else. And it's just truly beautiful. And Jenna Evans Welch does have a magic. And with this taking place in Salem, that magic might become a little more literal than her other books. Highly, highly recommend this one, especially if there's also some tie-ins to the Salem witch trials, as well as just the underlying magic of the history of family. And there is a bit of a treasure hunting aspect, a bit of an adventure scavenger hunt, if you will, that is really, really great. And also, if you have a obsession with like sky and have always wanted to be an astronomer, you will definitely love Mason's character. And just hearing his thoughts on the world was really, really deep to read, for lack of a better word. And I just love this book. I could gush about Jenna Evans Welch and her writing all day, but this book definitely solidified she is one of my all-time favorite authors. Now, for number 7, I don't know, as I've gotten older, it's been harder to find true book boyfriends, but I have tried. Don't you worry, I tried. And this book, I read the first book in this series over the summer, and I knew that this man was going to be one of my favorite protagonists for romance this year, and I was right. But that book is Cream and Punishment by Susanna Nix. And this was one of my priority reads of last year because, spoiler alert, I'm going to Rare London this summer and I'm so beyond excited. But that also means I have a lot of books to get through for the authors that are attending. And Susanna Nix is one of them. And this book was everything to me. It was just so good. I've also learned that, shock of all shocks, I actually love the second chance romance trope. Who am I? When it's done right, it just hits. And I've learned this in the past year. I've learned I actually really love that trope. And this is a second chance romance. Our main male, Tanner, is a literal walking green flag. And our girl, Lucy, is also really, really cool. She feels that she is the main reliance for her family to get things done. And she feels trapped by her family while also still loving them, but wanting to get away from them. And the two of them are just so wonderful together. And of course, in case you can't tell by the cover, this is all set around the King family ice cream creamery, which is just a fun little undernote to carry the book through and the series as a whole. I'm not gonna lie, my memory of this book has faded a little bit, and honestly, my biggest takeaway from this book was what a green flag Tanner was. Which is honestly sometimes all you need to go run out and pick up a book. So, here you go, ladies. Here's your green flag man. Now, speaking of books that I cannot believe are this far down on the list, but at the same time, that's nothing against the book itself, because I have not stopped screaming over this book or the first book in this duology since I read it. And I did get this as an ARC, but my Barnes & Noble came in clutch and had the book ready a week early, so I was able to read this and annotate it as I was finishing up the ARC. And it was my last read of the year. Number 6 is Dating and Dragons, and I just truly love this Barnes & Noble cover. If you can't tell by the tabs, I adored this book. And I could quite literally spend the rest of the day talking about my love for this book. And this book just is something that's so nostalgic in the way that its characters are. It is true peak YA romance. I adore it in every sense of the word. And this one in particular, we have family shenanigans. We have a D&D group that is also a live streaming D&D group campaign. We have our main female character. So Quinn has been burned really bad in the past, but she is desperate to make friends, and she ends up joining this D&D group. And one of the big rules for the group is that there's no dating amongst the group because it could ruin everything, because they are a live streaming campaign and are low-key famous. Low-key, if you count that. But her and Logan immediately hit it off, and then he starts kind of acting a little odd to her, which is very 180 from how when they met he was very charming. And if you know, you know. But as they continue this group, the two of them do grow closer, and eventually they just cannot stop their connection to each other and wanting to be together. So it's just the angstiness as well as just the heartwarmingness in this book was to die for. And her Quinn's grandmother. Yeah, I made a whole tag for Quinn's grandma because icon. If I want to be that woman when I grow up. I aspire to be that woman when I grow up because she was so cool and she was 100% meddling in her grandchildren's love lives, and I'm here for that. And I also got a secondary ship out of this book I was not expecting, and it was so cute. And also, for those of you who read the first book, Dungeons and Drama, there is a little bit of a Easter egg in here, and it literally made me so happy. I was actually squealing when I read it because it was so cool. I loved getting that little cameo. And also, funny enough, connecting it to my last book, he also has a part-time job in the ice cream shop, which is kind of a funny connection for my these two reads. And for this one, I'm just going to yell at you to read it because it's peak YA. And honestly, I feel like a lot of young adults I feel like a lot of college-age kids, and honestly, anyone, you will feel like they're transported back to high school in this book, but only in the best ways. All right, now these next 3 books I don't own, and I'm actually really shocked, but also not really at all, because this next book is a straight up thriller. And for me to have my number 5 favorite book of the year be a thriller is kind of mind blowing to me, because even though I got really into thrillers in the last year, they're not necessarily what I would call a favorite genre. But everything about this book, I read this in the summer at Disney, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. I literally think about this book at least once a month ever since I read it, and that is One of Us Knows. And the biggest reason for that is that this is just reminded me very heavily of Moon Knight, because in this book we have our main character has dissociative identity disorder, where she has multiple personalities living within her, and she has been sleeping dormant for about a year or a couple months when this book starts, and she has going headfirst into a job. She has no clue what it is. Her other identities are really not much help because they don't really know what's been going on either. And she is being asked to be looking at the preservation of this building on an island. But everything feels very off here. And she can't shake the sense that something is really wrong. And this book was just so fast paced, really creepy, and it just 100% fed my Moon Knight obsessed self because at that time I was still, well, I never left, but it was just so reminiscent of Moon Knight. And the commentary I was able to make in this book was truly hilarious because I really just had the time of my life making comparisons between the representation in Moon Knight and the representation in this book, as well as it was just so creative. And the fact that Alyssa Cole was able to pull this off as a storytelling structure was phenomenal. I also loved some of those creative liberties she took, and from what I saw and from what I read in her novel, it was really well researched. And I just think this book is such a unique thriller. So I cannot recommend One of Us Knows enough because it was creative. It was out of the box. It had such a good actual mystery plot tie-in, and I honestly was just obsessed. Also, if you love the isolated trope in thrillers, where in this case she's isolated on a really, really, really creepily old house on an island and no one can reach her because there's no cell source, this book just had that, and the atmosphere was unbelievable. I cannot recommend this book enough. It is quite possibly my favorite. No, it is my favorite thriller of all time, and I am so happy I picked it up last year. And speaking of genres that I was not expecting to make my top favorite books, but at the same time, I should not really be surprised. The Specimen. Now, this is the most me cover I've ever seen, and also the most, I just love this cover. It's gothic, and it perfectly captures this book. And I did talk about this one briefly in my academia recommendations video, but this book is peak gothic medical horror. It is set in the 1800s in Edinburgh, and we are following a woman whose son has been kidnapped. Now, her son has a heart defect. His condition was terminal. No one could help him. No doctors could save him. But she wanted to take every moment she could with him until he gets kidnapped. And this, of course, breaks her heart. It destroys her in grief. But nothing more so than when she goes into this exhibition about one of the medical doctors and sees a heart that has the same defect as her son's, and it starts talking to her. You heard me right. She is hearing this heart talk to her. And of course, no one believes her. They dismiss her as hysterical. So she takes it upon herself to go undercover as his cleaner so she can start really investigating if he murdered her son to get his heart for his collection. And this book, it leans into horror. It leans into gothic. It leans into female mother rage. It's so good. And I also absolutely adored the author's note and how she took her own family and history and she was able to interweave it. We also have in here a detective who is indigenous from Alaska, and he was brought over to Scotland by his father. So he's never fit in either, but he's made a life for himself, and he happens to be the only person willing to help out this grieving mother, as well as trying to connect the case. But time's running out. People are starting to not looking to solve this. It's just so good, guys. I adored this book, and I need to get it ASAP because it needs to go in my collection. I have not heard anyone talk about this book, and I am going to push it on all of you. And if you love horror, gothic horror, medical horror, historical thrillers, anything along those tropes, or just want to read about a mother's rage and root for all her wrongs, pick it up. It's so good. Now, like I said, these next 3 books are essentially tied in my heart because I love each of them for such different reasons. And this next book might not seem like a shock, but to me it was because this was not on my radar. No plans to pick it up. I didn't really understand what it was going for, but the author herself reached out to me because I had loved her book so much last year, and she got it on my radar, so I said, oh, what the heck. And this became one of the only series I finished, and every single book was 5, 4, or 4.5 stars. I was obsessed, and this book was my 3rd read of the year. I read this all the way back in January, and I kid you not, I have thought about it every single month since. And that is The King and Vi by Shanna Gallen. You guys, I don't even know what to say other than I adored this book. So we also have a really unique setup in here. And Shanna Gallen pitched this whole trilogy, Misfortune's Favorites, as a riches to rags story. So and it's also inspired by the curse and counter curse of Sleeping Beauty. And in this book, three boys who are at a school for troubled boys, three rich sons of dukes or upper class society have sent their sons here, and they decide to steal alcohol from a witch and her sister. And that does not go well because the witch curses them that on their 30th birthday, each of them is going to lose everything. And of course, superstition, ha ha ha. But then on King, on his 30th birthday, his father is arrested for treason. All his assets are taken, and he has nowhere to go and live. And this book, I think the reason this was my favorite of the trilogy and also one of my favorite books of the year is because in historical romance, this went outside the box. So in this book, we don't visit upper class London at all. There's no society. We are visiting a very rundown town, and our female lead is a 19-year-old tavern owner who is having to raise her younger brothers because their parents are dead. It goes into the poorer parts of Victorian or Regency London, and it is a part that's not explored. But we have a gang lord who is making everyone's lives miserable. We have found family. We have the actual working class of London in this time period that is such a bigger representation of that time period than many historical romances. And this book meets because he walks into her bar feeling very let down, obviously, because he's lost everything, and he destroys her bar. And she has no way to pay it back. So now he is working for her, and this is the first time this man has done anything in his life. And their romance was just so satisfying. He becomes an older brother figure to her younger brothers, and there is just, oh, and I cannot say anymore, but just trust me when I say the moments at the end of this book actually had me stressed there, and just everything about this I love. And each of the books in the series is good, but nothing will ever live up to this one. And I think this is my tied for my favorite Shannon Galloway. And if you have any interest in that light historical fantasy element that is a plot device, but it's not heavily present, go pick this up. This trilogy is just so much fun and with a really unique take on the historical romance genre. All right, now number 2. I have nothing to say except go read this book right now. Yes, I'm talking to you. Go read this book because it is. That's all I can say. Or The Dark Standstill. You're telling me this is a debut? What? 5 stars, no notes. How do I even describe this book to you without just screaming? Once again, one of my earlier reads of the year, and I pretty much texted my friend nonstop for weeks, just telling her that this book is Enchanted Forest Rumbell from Once Upon a Time. And yes, I do love them. Do not come for me. They are my OG ship. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about the gothic brilliance of this book. So I read this one from the library, and I have since bought my own edition, but I actually went through, tabbed, and annotated a library book, and then just took pictures of it, so when I eventually got this book, I could recreate all my annotations, because it gave everything. So this book is inspired by Slavic folklore, particularly Polish folklore, and the cover is also one of my absolute favorite things for showcasing the features. This has a house that is 100%, it's a gothic fantasy, and the house is a character in itself. And it is also not shying away from some of the darker aspects of folklore and fantasy. And I just utterly adore this book. I literally cannot even speak. I have so much love for this book, I can't put it into words. But their romance was also angsty, and I got my heart ripped out. And then it was slowly pushed back in to my chest. And then I just started wanting to cry because there's no words. I literally cannot form words about why I love this book and how much I love it. But just go into it if you love fantasy with heavy romance line, but also coming out of where you grew up to become who you want to be. If you are someone who loves sentient houses with a mystery underlying it, like true gothic literature, read this book. If you want to see a really neat magic system that really does, these blue butterflies are here for a reason. Yeah, I think I can just stare at you all day just trying to form words, but we're just going to leave it at 5 stars, no notes. I love this. Go pick it up. The Scarlet Alchemist. At the very beginning of the year, I was kind of in a reading slump. When I tell you I binged this book in one day, driving with my family to St. Augustine, I binged this book in one day. I hadn't done that in like almost a year by that point. Everything about this book was just gorgeously written. I'm a history nerd. I adore alternate history. So this book is all inspired by the question, what would have happened if we're in the Tang Dynasty, right? Yes, and this is all inspired by the question. I'll use framing angle changes, but my camera died, and I do not know how long I have, so we're running with it. This entire book is inspired by if, during the Tang Dynasty, they had actually found a way to achieve immortality. One of the empresses, who is infamous even today for being ruthless and cunning, and the only female emperor of China. And in this book, she is holding competition to see who can become her next royal alchemist. And they are also tasked with getting and maintaining this elixir of life. And we are following our main character, and even today I still cannot say her name, Xilin, and she is living with her two cousins because her parents died when she was younger, and she wants to get out of this town. And she believes that the only way she's ever going to escape is by achieving and becoming this Scarlet Alchemist. And this book is just so beautiful because it leans into fantasy horror, which is beautifully done. There's a lot of body horror and blood, and I never watched it, but I know it gives Full Metal Alchemist vibes if that is something that interests you. And the way this book left off, I actually just sat there for I think about 5 minutes just staring at my Kindle. Because and the book, the sequel, released, I think, like 2 months ago in November, and I need to get my hands on it. I have it. It's right over there. I'm looking right at it, and it's going to get read very soon. I think I'm going to read it over spring break, maybe, or whenever my library hold comes in, because, again, gorgeous, stunning Fairy Loot editions bring me my anticipated releases is always a win. So we also have a romance in here that I just giggled and kicked my feet about because literally the entire time is her killing and getting bloody and him just kind of looking queasy but supporting her the whole time. It's truly a gem of a ship dynamic. And beyond that, there's family. There's the blood ties of family and what you're willing to go through to protect the people you love.
And with that, my camera died once again. But regardless, let me know in the comments which of these books are on your TBR or you've read and loved, and what was your favorite book of 2024. If you want to stick around my bookish corner of the interweb, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you want to find me outside, my social medias are linked below. Until next time, I'm Kay. Bye!